The Deep Harbor Trading Station was the kind of place where beings from a dozen different species could meet, argue, trade, and occasionally try to kill each other without causing a major diplomatic incident. Marcus Sullivan had been running his repair shop in the station's industrial sector for 3 years, and he'd learned to identify potential customers by their footsteps long before they reached his door. Heavy boots meant Terran miners with broken equipment. The whisper-soft tread of mag boots usually indicated Centauri merchants with delicate electronics. But the rhythmic clank of metal on metal that echoed through the corridor now was something he'd never heard before. The woman who entered his workshop moved like liquid lightning encased in armor. Her skin was the distinctive silver blue of the Zephyrian Dominion, marked with intricate tattoo patterns that told the story of battles won and honors earned. But it was her equipment that made Marcus's breath catch. Ceremonial battle armor that looked like it had been forged from starlight and tempered in the heart of a dying sun. "You are Marcus Sullivan," she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that suggested people usually did whatever she told them to do. "The human engineer who specializes in exotic metallurgy." "That's me," Marcus replied, trying to keep his tone professional despite the fact that he was pretty sure he was looking at Zephyrian royalty. The quality of her armor, the complexity of her tattoos, and the way she held herself all screamed high nobility. "What can I do for you, Commander?" "Thyra Velshan," she replied, removing her helmet to reveal features that belonged in a sculpture garden dedicated to warrior goddesses. Her silver hair was braided with small metal ornaments that chimed softly when she moved, and her eyes were the pale blue of winter sky. Third daughter of the Velshan dynasty, heir to the Crimson Throne of Zephyria Prime. Marcus mentally adjusted his customer service approach from polite professional to don't accidentally start an interstellar war. "Your Highness, I'm honored by your visit. What brings you to my humble workshop?" Princess Thyra gestured to her breastplate, and Marcus could see the problem immediately. What looked like decorative scrollwork was actually a complex pattern of stress relief channels designed to distribute impact force across the armor's surface. Several of these channels showed hairline cracks, and one had a section missing entirely where something had hit hard enough to actually tear the metal. "Battle damage," she explained tersely. "Sustained during a skirmish with raiders 3 days ago. I need it repaired before the ceremony of ascension tomorrow." Marcus whistled low, running his fingers over the damaged sections. The metal was unlike anything in his database, some kind of crystalline alloy that seemed to shimmer with its own internal light. "This is beautiful work. Who's the original smith?" "My great-great-grandmother, Velthis the Blade Singer. She forged this armor over 2 centuries ago for my ancestor's coronation." Thyra's voice carried a mixture of pride and desperation. "It has been worn by every Velshan heir during their ascension ceremony since then. And you can't get it repaired by a Zephyrian smith because—" Thyra's jaw tightened, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the frustration she'd been carefully controlling. The 3 Zephyrian smiths currently on Deep Harbor all refused to attempt the repair. They claim the risk of catastrophic failure is too high, that the metal has been sung in ways they don't understand. Marcus nodded, understanding the cultural implications. Zephyrian smithcraft was as much art as engineering, involving harmonic frequencies that could alter molecular structures at the quantum level. It was beautiful, effective, and completely different from human metallurgy. "So you thought you'd try the crude human who hits things with hammers?" Marcus asked, not without humor. For the first time since entering his shop, Princess Thyra smiled, an expression that transformed her stern features into something breathtaking. "I thought I'd try the human who successfully repaired Captain Velkos's plasma sword last month. He was very impressed with your work." Marcus remembered the job, a tricky repair that had required him to essentially rebuild the weapon's quantum resonance chamber from scratch. It had been one of the most challenging projects of his career, and apparently word was getting around. "I'll need to run some analysis first," he said, pulling out his molecular scanner. "This alloy is beyond anything I've worked with before. I'll need to understand its structure before I even attempt repairs." "How long?" Thyra asked. "For the analysis?" "A few hours. For the actual repair?" Marcus studied the damage pattern, his engineer's mind already working through possible approaches. If it's even possible, probably 3 days minimum. You said the ceremony is tomorrow? Thyra's expression tightened. The ceremony of ascension cannot be delayed. It marks the beginning of my trial year, the period during which I must prove my worthiness to inherit the throne. Without the ancestral armor, you can't participate, Marcus finished. And if you can't participate, someone else gets to try for the crown. My cousin Draven has been waiting for such an opportunity, Thyra replied grimly. He believes the throne should go to someone who values traditional Zephyrian strength over what he calls my progressive sympathies toward alien cultures. Marcus looked at the damaged armor again, understanding now that this wasn't just about fixing some fancy gear, this was about the future direction of an entire civilization. No pressure there. Your Highness, he said finally, I can't promise success, but I can promise that if there's a way to repair this armor, I'll find it. The question is whether you're willing to trust a human with something this important to your people. Thyra studied his face for a long moment, her pale blue eyes seeming to weigh his character as carefully as he'd been examining her armor. Captain Velkos said something interesting about you, Engineer Sullivan. He said that you don't just repair things, you understand them. That you approach each piece as if it were a living thing that needs healing rather than a machine that needs fixing. Metal has memory, Marcus replied, surprised by her insight. Every stress, every impact, every temperature change leaves traces in the molecular structure. You have to listen to what the metal is telling you about what it's been through before you can figure out how to make it whole again. Something shifted in Thyra's expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. That is very similar to what my great-great-grandmother wrote about her smithcraft. She said that metal chooses its shape, and the smith's job is simply to help it find its true form. Marcus felt a strange connection forming, a recognition that despite their different species and cultures, they both understood the profound relationship between craftsperson and creation. Then we understand each other, Your Highness. Give me 3 days, and I'll give you back armor that's worthy of the Velshan legacy. Thyra removed the damaged pieces carefully, her movements ritual precise. I will remain on the station while you work. The armor must not leave my sight, it is a sacred trust. As she placed the gleaming metal on his workbench, Marcus realized he'd just accepted the most important commission of his career. Success would mean helping a progressive ruler claim her rightful throne. Failure would mean destroying a priceless cultural artifact and probably ending his career in disgrace. Looking at Princess Thyra's determined expression, Marcus decided those were odds he could live with. By the end of the first day, Marcus had confirmed what he'd suspected, the armor wasn't just damaged, it was dying. The molecular bonds that held the exotic alloy together had been destabilized by whatever weapon had struck it, and the crystalline structure was slowly unraveling at the quantum level. Within a week, the entire breastplate would crumble to glittering dust. How bad is it? Princess Thyra asked, looking up from the technical manual she'd been reading. She'd spent the entire day in his workshop, initially claiming she needed to guard the armor but gradually becoming genuinely interested in his diagnostic process. Bad, Marcus replied, pulling up a holographic display of the metal's molecular structure. See these gaps in the lattice pattern? That's where the bonds have broken down. The damage is spreading along the stress relief channels like cracks in ice. Thyra studied the display with the focused attention of someone who'd been trained in strategic analysis. Can you stop the deterioration? I think so, but it's going to require a complete molecular restructuring. I'll need to break down the existing bonds and rebuild them from scratch, which means essentially melting down the armor and reforming it. Marcus rotated the display, highlighting the areas of worst damage. The tricky part is maintaining the harmonic frequencies that give the metal its special properties. You understand harmonic metallurgy? Thyra asked, surprise clear in her voice. I understand the theory, Marcus corrected. I've studied Zephyrian smithcraft extensively, but I've never attempted anything on this scale. Your people's techniques are incredibly sophisticated, using sound frequencies to alter molecular behavior is something human science is only beginning to explore. Thyra was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing patterns in the air as if following musical notation only she could see. My great-great-grandmother's journals described the forging process. She spent months composing the harmonic sequence that would give the armor its strength and flexibility. The metal was sung into shape over the course of 13 days. Do you still have the harmonic sequence? Marcus asked hopefully. No, Thyra replied, her expression darkening. The knowledge died with her. Each smith guards their techniques jealously, passing them only to chosen apprentices. When Velthis died in battle, her secrets died with her. Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering the problem. So I need to reverse engineer a harmonic sequence from a piece of metal that's 2 centuries old, then use it to rebuild molecular bonds I barely understand. This just keeps getting better. Despite the obvious frustration in his voice, Thyra smiled. You don't sound defeated, Engineer Sullivan. You sound intrigued. Occupational hazard, Marcus admitted. The more impossible a problem looks, the more I want to solve it. My ex-girlfriend used to say it was my most annoying personality trait. Your former romantic partner disapproved of your dedication to your craft? Thyra asked, and Marcus noticed that her translator had rendered girlfriend as something more formal in Zephyrian. She disapproved of me spending more time with broken machinery than with her, Marcus replied, then immediately wondered why he was sharing personal information with an alien princess. What about you? Any disapproving romantic partners? Thyra's expression shifted to something Marcus couldn't quite read. Zephyrian royalty does not typically engage in romantic relationships for pleasure. Marriage is a political alliance, companionship is a luxury we cannot afford, and emotional attachment is considered a weakness that enemies can exploit. That sounds lonely, Marcus observed. It is the price of leadership, Thyra replied, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't entirely comfortable with that price. They worked together through the afternoon, Marcus running increasingly complex molecular simulations while Thyra shared what she remembered of her ancestors' techniques. Gradually, Marcus began to see patterns in the metal's structure, harmonic nodes that corresponded to specific frequencies, quantum resonances that suggested the original forging process had been even more sophisticated than he'd realized. Look at this, he said, pulling up a new analysis. The stress relief channels aren't just functional, they're actually part of a larger harmonic network. The entire breastplate is designed to resonate at specific frequencies, which is what gives it its incredible strength-to-weight ratio. Thyra leaned closer to study the display, and Marcus caught the scent of her hair, something like ozone and starlight that was entirely alien but somehow appealing. You're saying the armor is essentially a musical instrument? More like a symphony frozen in metal, Marcus replied. If I can figure out the base harmonic sequence, I should be able to reconstruct the entire piece. But I'll need to work fast, the molecular breakdown is accelerating. As evening approached, Marcus realized he'd been so absorbed in the technical challenge that he'd forgotten about the political implications. Princess Thyra, meanwhile, had proven to be surprisingly good company, intelligent, insightful, and possessed of a dry sense of humor that emerged when she wasn't being formal. Why are you doing this? She asked as Marcus began preparing for the second day's work. You could simply declare the repair impossible and face no consequences. Instead, you're risking your reputation on a project that may well be doomed to failure. Marcus considered the question while organizing his tools. Because it's worth saving, he said finally. Not just as a piece of historical artifact, but as an example of what's possible when someone combines technical skill with genuine artistry. Your great-great-grandmother created something beautiful and functional that has lasted centuries. That kind of craftsmanship deserves respect, regardless of what species created it. Thyra was quiet for so long that Marcus began to worry he'd said something wrong. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than he'd heard it before. You honor her memory with your words, Marcus Sullivan. And you honor our people by recognizing the value in our work. She paused, seeming to consider something. Tomorrow, when you begin the reconstruction, I would like to help. Your Highness, I couldn't ask you to. You're not asking, Thyra interrupted, her royal authority reasserting itself. I'm offering. This armor represents my lineage, my right to rule, my connection to the ancestors who shaped our civilization. If it's going to be reborn, I want to be part of that process. Marcus looked at her determined expression and realized that despite their different backgrounds, they shared something fundamental, a deep respect for craftsmanship and the belief that some things were worth preserving regardless of the cost. All right, Your Highness, he said. Tomorrow, we'll try to resurrect a masterpiece. As Thyra prepared to leave for the evening, she turned back at the workshop door. Marcus? Thank you for understanding what this means to me. After she left, Marcus stared at the damaged armor gleaming under his work lights and realized that somewhere during their first day together, Princess Thyra had stopped being a customer and had become something much more complicated. The reconstruction took 63 hours of continuous work, with Marcus and Thyra taking turns manning the harmonic resonance chamber while the other monitored molecular stability readings. By the third day, they had developed an almost telepathic understanding of each other's working rhythm. Marcus would adjust the frequency modulation just as Thyra reached for the harmonic calibrator, and she would compensate for quantum fluctuations a split second before his instruments detected the variance. Temperature spike in Sector 7, Thyra called out, her hands dancing over the Zephyrian harmonic controls with unconscious grace. Compensating, Marcus replied, adjusting the human molecular stabilizers to counteract the thermal bloom. Bringing it down, now. The armor hung suspended in the reconstruction field, its molecular structure rebuilding itself one crystalline layer at a time. What had begun as scattered fragments of exotic alloy was slowly becoming something magnificent. Not just a reproduction of the original, but an evolution of it. The harmonic frequencies Marcus had painstakingly reverse-engineered were combining with human metallurgical techniques in ways that neither species had achieved alone. It's working, Thyra breathed, watching as the final stress relief channel formed itself with perfect precision. Marcus, it's actually working. The reconstruction field powered down with a soft harmonic chord that seemed to echo the armor's own resonant frequency. In the sudden silence, the completed breastplate hung gleaming in the chamber, its surface rippling with internal light patterns that spoke of perfect molecular harmony. We did it, Marcus said, hardly believing it himself. We actually did it. Thyra reached into the chamber with reverent hands, lifting the restored armor as if it were made of crystallized starlight. The metal sang softly at her touch, responding to her bioelectric field with harmonic frequencies that proved the reconstruction had been successful beyond their wildest hopes. It's more than restored, she said wonderingly. It's enhanced. I can feel the harmonic resonance in my bones. Marcus grinned, exhaustion and triumph warring in his expression. Human molecular stabilization techniques combined with Zephyrian harmonic metallurgy. The alloy is actually stronger than the original now, while maintaining all the flexibility and resonant properties your ancestor built into it. They emerged from the workshop to find that word of their project had spread throughout Deep Harbor. A crowd had gathered in the corridor, traders, diplomats, station personnel, and a delegation of Zephyrian nobles who had apparently arrived on the morning shuttle. Marcus recognized several species in the crowd, but it was the Zephyrians who drew his attention. Their elaborate tattoos and formal armor marked them as high-ranking members of Thyra's court, and their expressions suggested they were not entirely pleased with recent developments. Princess Thyra, called out a tall Zephyrian male whose tattoos indicated military rank and noble blood, we have come to escort you home for the ceremony of ascension. I trust your shopping expedition has been successful. The dismissive tone and pointed glance at Marcus made it clear that the delegation viewed her presence at Deep Harbor as an embarrassing indulgence rather than a necessary repair mission. Thyra's expression hardened into royal formality as she faced her people. Lord Commander Draven, she replied coolly, how thoughtful of you to personally ensure my safe return. As you can see, the ancestral armor has been successfully restored. Draven's pale blue eyes flicked to the gleaming breastplate, and Marcus caught a flash of disappointment that was quickly masked. Indeed. The court smiths will need to verify the repair's authenticity, of course. We cannot have you participating in the ceremony with inferior workmanship. The insult was clearly deliberate, and Marcus felt his temper flare. The workmanship is perfect, he said, stepping forward. The armor's molecular structure has been completely rebuilt using a combination of traditional Zephyrian harmonic techniques and modern human metallurgy. It's actually stronger than the original. A human lectures us on Zephyrian craftsmanship, Draven observed to his companions, his voice dripping with contempt. How educational. Marcus was about to respond when Thyra's hand touched his arm, not restraining, but somehow communicating that this was her battle to fight. She moved to stand beside him, the repaired armor cradled in her arms, her expression shifting from formal courtesy to something much more dangerous. Lord Commander, she said, her voice carrying the kind of authority that made the entire corridor fall silent, you question the quality of work performed by the engineer who achieved what 3 Zephyrian master smiths declared impossible. I question the wisdom of entrusting sacred artifacts to alien hands, Draven replied, his own authority clear. Some traditions should not be violated, regardless of expedience. Thyra looked at Marcus for a moment, her pale blue eyes holding an expression he couldn't quite read. Then she did something that sent shockwaves through every being present. She placed her free hand over his heart and spoke in formal High Zephyrian, her voice carrying clearly through the crowded corridor. I name Marcus Sullivan of Earth as my Velasher, soul-bonded consort, chosen companion, equal in honor and partner in purpose. Let all who witness carry word that Princess Thyra Velshan has chosen her heart's champion. The silence that followed was so complete Marcus could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. The Zephyrian delegation stood frozen in shock, while the mixed crowd of aliens began murmuring in dozens of languages as universal translators struggled to convey the magnitude of what had just happened. Thyra, Marcus whispered, what did you just do? I claimed you, she replied softly, her hand still resting over his heart. In front of witnesses, according to the ancient traditions, with words that cannot be taken back. Her voice grew stronger, addressing the crowd. Marcus Sullivan has proven his worth through deed and dedication. He has honored our traditions while bringing his own strength to our cause. I name him consort by choice, not by arrangement, and challenge any who would question his worthiness to face me in the circle of honor. Lord Commander Draven's face had gone pale with fury. Princess, you cannot be serious. The succession laws. Allow the heir to choose their consort, Thyra interrupted, her voice ringing with absolute authority. The laws require only that the chosen prove their worth through trial and commitment. I have chosen, and I will stand by that choice before the throne itself if necessary. Marcus looked at the faces surrounding them, shock, outrage, curiosity, and in some cases what might have been approval. He understood now that Thyra hadn't just declared her romantic intentions, she'd started a political revolution. Your Highness, he said quietly, are you sure about this? Because I have a feeling we just made your path to the throne considerably more complicated. Thyra smiled, her hand still resting over his heart, and for the first time since he'd met her she looked completely free of the burden of royal duty. Marcus, my dear Velasher, complications make life interesting. And I suspect our life together is going to be very interesting indeed. As the crowd began to disperse, many of them heading directly to communication terminals to spread word of this unprecedented development, Marcus realized that his simple repair job had just become something much larger, a declaration of love that would either unite 2 species or tear a kingdom apart. Looking into Thyra's determined eyes, he decided those were odds he was willing to face. The ceremony of witnessing took place in the Great Hall of Zephyria Prime's royal palace, a vast chamber whose crystalline walls amplified sound into complex harmonies that seemed to resonate in the bones of everyone present. Marcus stood at the center of the hall wearing formal Zephyrian court dress that had been hastily modified for human physiology, trying not to think about the hundreds of nobles, military commanders, and foreign dignitaries who were watching his every move. The trial of worthiness has 3 components, announced Elder Velthara, the ancient Zephyrian who served as keeper of royal traditions. Courage in battle, wisdom in judgment, and mastery of the sacred crafts. The claimant must demonstrate excellence in all three to be deemed worthy of bonding with the royal blood. Marcus had spent the past month preparing for this moment, training with Zephyrian weapons masters, studying their legal codes and philosophical traditions, and learning the intricate art of harmonic metallurgy that lay at the heart of their culture. Thyra had been his constant companion and teacher, guiding him through the maze of customs and expectations that surrounded royal consorts. The trial of courage came first, a formal combat demonstration against three of Zephyria's finest warriors. Marcus had been terrified that his human physiology would prove inadequate, but the months of intensive training had transformed his understanding of combat. Zephyrian martial arts emphasized harmony between body and weapon, using resonance and timing rather than brute force to overcome opponents. His engineer's understanding of physics and mechanics proved surprisingly relevant as he learned to read the harmonic patterns in his opponent's movements. When the combat trial concluded with Marcus having held his own against warriors who had trained their entire lives, even his harshest critics grudgingly acknowledged that the human possessed genuine skill rather than mere luck. The trial of wisdom involved arbitrating a complex legal dispute that had been crafted specifically to test his understanding of Zephyrian justice and his ability to balance competing interests. Marcus drew on his experience negotiating contracts between different species, finding solutions that honored Zephyrian law while incorporating principles of fairness that transcended cultural boundaries. But it was the final trial, the test of craftsmanship, that would determine not just his worthiness as a consort, but his ability to understand the soul of Zephyrian civilization. The claimant will forge a bond token, Elder Velthera announced, a piece of jewelry that will symbolically unite his essence with that of Princess Thyra. The work must demonstrate mastery of our sacred techniques while incorporating elements unique to his own heritage. He will have 1 day to complete the task, working alone and without assistance. Marcus approached the forge that had been prepared for him, a complex array of harmonic resonators and molecular manipulators that represented the pinnacle of Zephyrian smithcraft technology. Beside it lay his materials, exotic alloys provided by the royal treasury, human metals he had specially requested, and most importantly, a small fragment of the original ancestral armor that Thyra had permitted him to incorporate into the design. As the great clock tower chimed the beginning of his allotted time, Marcus closed his eyes and let his mind reach for the design that had been forming over weeks of preparation. The bond token would need to tell a story, not just of his love for Thyra, but of the potential for unity between their peoples. He began with fire and song, heating the exotic alloys while harmonic resonators filled the forge with frequencies that would alter the metal's molecular structure. But instead of following traditional Zephyrian patterns, Marcus introduced human techniques, quantum manipulation methods that could create new forms of crystalline lattice, molecular bonding approaches that added strength through controlled imperfection rather than harmonic purity. Hours passed in a blur of sparks and sound, metal flowing and reforming under his guidance. The watching nobles murmured among themselves as they observed techniques they had never seen before, human engineering principles applied to sacred Zephyrian arts, creating something entirely new. As the afternoon wore on, the bond token began to take shape. It was a pair of bracelets designed to be worn together, their surfaces carved with interlocking patterns that told the story of two different approaches to understanding the universe. One bracelet featured traditional Zephyrian harmonic spirals that would resonate with the wearer's bioelectric field, while the other displayed geometric patterns based on human mathematical principles that created visual harmonies through precise proportional relationships. But the true innovation was in how they connected. When worn together, the bracelets would create a single harmonic system, their different resonant frequencies combining to produce something more beautiful and complex than either could achieve alone. It was a physical representation of what Marcus hoped his relationship with Thyra could become, not a compromise between two cultures, but a synthesis that honored both while creating something entirely new. As the final hour approached, Marcus began the most delicate part of the process, incorporating the fragment of ancestral armor into the joint where the bracelets would connect. The ancient metal, with its own harmonic signature accumulated over centuries, would serve as a bridge between past and future, tradition and innovation. When the great clock chimed the end of his allotted time, Marcus stepped back from the forge, exhaustion and satisfaction warring in his expression. The bond token lay completed on the cooling rack, its surface rippling with internal light patterns that proved the harmonic integration had been successful. Elder Velthara approached with the dignity of someone who had witnessed royal ceremonies for over a century. She lifted the paired bracelets with reverent hands, her ancient eyes studying the craftsmanship with expert attention. The work demonstrates mastery of both traditional techniques and innovative applications, she announced to the assembled court. The harmonic resonance is pure, the symbolic representation is clear, and the integration of ancestral elements shows proper reverence for our heritage. She paused, her expression shifting to something that might have been wonder. Moreover, the design suggests possibilities for artistic development that our craftsmen have never explored. She turned to face Marcus directly. You have proven your worthiness through courage, wisdom, and skill. More importantly, you have shown that love between species need not mean the abandonment of tradition, but can instead become the foundation for new traditions that honor the best of both cultures. Princess Thyra stepped forward, her own formal court dress shimmering with embedded crystals that caught and reflected the hall's harmonic lighting. She extended her hands, and Marcus placed the bond token bracelets on her wrists, the metals singing softly as it recognized her biosignature. When she took his hands and placed the matching bracelet on his wrist, the harmonic resonance between the paired pieces created a sound like distant music, beautiful and complex and entirely unique. By the ancient laws and the witness of the court, Elder Velthara declared, I pronounce Marcus Sullivan and Princess Thyra Velshan bonded in heart, mind, and purpose. Let their union serve as a bridge between worlds and an example of what becomes possible when different strengths combine in harmony. As the court erupted in formal acknowledgments and genuine celebration, Marcus looked into Thyra's eyes and saw not just love, but partnership, a recognition that they had found in each other not just romance, but a shared vision of what the future could hold. So, he said quietly as the ceremonial music began to play, what happens now? Thyra smiled, her bond bracelet chiming softly in harmony with his. Now we begin the real work, showing our people and yours that the best traditions aren't preserved by keeping them unchanged, but by allowing them to grow and evolve through contact with new ideas and new hearts. Years later, historians would mark the ceremony of witnessing as the beginning of a new era in interspecies relations, a time when difference became a source of strength rather than division. But in that moment, as Marcus and Thyra stood together in the great hall while their bond bracelets sang in perfect harmony, they were simply two people who had found in each other the courage to build something beautiful from the meeting of different worlds. 5 years after their bonding, Marcus stood in the workshop of the Royal Institute of Harmonic Arts, watching his latest apprentice, a young Zephyrian named Velkirin, attempt to integrate human quantum mechanics with traditional harmonic forging. The technique that had once been considered revolutionary was now standard curriculum, taught alongside ancient Zephyrian methods as part of a new approach to craftsmanship that honored both innovation and tradition. Master Sullivan, Velkirin called out, frustration evident in his voice, the molecular bonds keep destabilizing during the harmonic transition. The human techniques aren't responding to the frequency modulation. That's because you're thinking of them as separate systems, Marcus replied, moving to examine the young smith's work. Remember, the quantum fields and harmonic resonance aren't competing forces, they're different aspects of the same underlying reality. Let them find their natural synchronization instead of trying to force them together. As Velkirin adjusted his approach, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed since that first day when a desperate princess had walked into his repair shop. He was now master engineer of the royal household, director of the institute, and most importantly, Thyra's partner in both love and governance. Their bond had indeed served as a bridge between species, inspiring dozens of other interspecies unions and leading to collaborative projects that neither humans nor Zephyrians could have achieved alone. Marcus? Thyra's voice carried clearly through the workshop as she entered, her presence immediately warming the space around her. She now wore the full regalia of a ruling queen, having ascended to the throne the previous year when her father stepped down to enjoy a peaceful retirement. But her eyes still lit up the same way when she looked at him, and she still wore the bond bracelet they had forged together during their ceremony. Your Majesty, Marcus replied with mock formality, earning a smile from his wife and a barely suppressed laugh from Valkyrin. The human delegation has arrived for the trade negotiations, Thyra continued, slipping into the comfortable rhythm of shared responsibilities they had developed over years of partnership. Ambassador Chen is particularly interested in seeing the new alloy composites we've been developing. Marcus nodded, understanding the subtext. The trade negotiations weren't just about economics, they were about demonstrating that cooperation between species could produce benefits for everyone involved. The new alloys, created using techniques that combined human engineering with Zephyrian harmonic science, were stronger and more versatile than anything either species had produced independently. Valkyrin, continue working on that resonance integration, Marcus instructed his apprentice. I want to see a stable harmonic matrix by the time I return. As they walked together toward the diplomatic wing of the palace, Thyra slipped her hand into his, their bond bracelets chiming softly at the contact. Any regrets? She asked, a question that had become a private ritual between them. Just one, Marcus replied, as he always did. I wish we'd met sooner. If we'd met sooner, we might not have been ready for each other, Thyra pointed out. Sometimes the best discoveries happen exactly when they're supposed to. Marcus looked at his wife, brilliant, compassionate, strong enough to rule an empire while gentle enough to encourage a nervous apprentice, and realized that she was absolutely right. Their story had begun with damaged armor and a desperate repair job, but it had become something much larger, proof that when different worlds were willing to trust each other, the result could be stronger and more beautiful than either could achieve alone. Come on, Your Majesty, he said, squeezing her hand. Let's go show our guests what's possible when engineers and royalty work together. As they entered the diplomatic chambers together, their bond bracelets singing in quiet harmony, Marcus reflected that some repairs didn't just fix what was broken, they created something entirely new. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, that something new could change the entire galaxy.